Good evening, I'm Shad Olson. This is News Center 1 at 10. The Pentagon changing its story tonight about the circumstances leading to a deadly U.S. airstrike on a hospital in Afghanistan. Multiple investigations now underway to determine just how and why that attack took place. It happened in Kunduz, where U.S. forces are helping Afghans retake that city from the Taliban.
Even in war, this should never happen. The only trauma hospital in Kunduz repeatedly attacked early Saturday by U.S. air power. At least 22 killed, including doctors and patients. 6 reportedly burned in their beds. But did the U.S. know it was targeting a hospital? Doctors Without Borders, which runs the hospital, says it did and calls it a war crime.
That hospitals and patients during war should be safe places where care can be given, and this has been violated.
Survivors were transferred to other hospitals. The Pentagon first said American troops had been in danger, but today changed its story, saying Afghan forces were under fire.
That they were taking fire from enemy positions and asked for air support from U.S. forces. An airstrike was then called to eliminate the Taliban threat, and several civilians were accidentally struck.
Afghan officials say Taliban fighters were firing from the hospital.
10 to 15 terrorists were hiding in the hospital last night, and they came under attack.
Doctors Without Borders denies that.
This hospital is a fenced hospital, like all our hospitals, guarded by guards. The only people inside the hospital are patients, caretakers, and staff.
Doctors Without Borders says it had given the U.S. military the coordinates for the hospital and during the airstrike even pleaded for the bombing to stop. Calls, it says, went unheeded.
The White House says 3 investigations are underway. The question remains, did the U.S. military know it was firing on a hospital? A senior American official familiar with the way airstrikes are carried out in Afghanistan told us the U.S. doesn't bomb without having, quote, eyes on the target. Richard Engel, NBC News, Istanbul.
Meantime, back in the United States, at least 9 people are dead following weekend flooding in South Carolina. Search and rescue missions are underway throughout Columbia, and more evacuation orders are forthcoming. Although the rain is starting to subside now, the situation remains dangerous. That according to South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Not only is flooding still a major issue, but tens of thousands of residents there are without both water and power.
I received a phone call from President Obama. He was extremely gracious and kind. He and Mrs. Obama expressed their concerns and their prayers for the people of South Carolina, and also said that they were there to assist. Prior to my conversation with President Obama, we went ahead and did something that's very unusual, but it allows us to expedite the process. We did a verbal request for a major disaster declaration.
Governor Haley still warning residents to stay home and to stay off the roads. The Coast Guard not giving up hope in their search for survivors of a U.S. cargo ship lost Thursday. 33 crew members aboard the El Faro when it went down in the Atlantic after being hit by Hurricane Joaquin. Yesterday, the Coast Guard finding 1 victim floating in one of the ship's survival suits. The remains were not identifiable and were not recovered. Searchers are primarily focused on a debris field about 300 square nautical miles near the Bahamas. In Oregon, the Umpqua Community College reopening to staff after the deadliest shooting in Oregon's history. 10 people were killed on campus Thursday, that including the gunman. On Thursday, a student gunman killing 9 people before turning his weapon on himself. 3 of the most seriously injured victims still being treated at the hospital. All but 1 is expected to make a full recovery. Students can speak with grief counselors and are scheduled to resume classes coming up on October 12th. Meantime, in Harrisburg, South Dakota, a grand jury indicting a 16-year-old student who's accused of shooting his high school principal. Mason Buell is charged with first-degree attempted murder after shooting Harrisburg High School principal Kevin Lean last Wednesday. The bullet only lightly wounding Lean in the arm. Buell was then restrained by other school leaders, and no one else was hurt in that incident. Buell is being held without bond. These incidents putting gun violence back in the spotlight in our nation. Tonight, Caroline Patrick is sitting down with a local gun shop owner to discuss gun laws and their relation to mass shootings.
More and more are arguing the end of gun violence. Once again, the big question, how do we deal with it? We could go on and on about this debate, but local experts share their thoughts after the most recent mass shooting. The question front and center once again.
It's a good question. What do you do about the violence?
The tragedy in Oregon reigniting the flames over gun violence. Now a local expert, Greg Vecchi, is speaking out.
So typically my background in the FBI was as a special agent, criminal investigator, and did a lot of stuff, but pretty much focused on violent crimes.
With a strong background working for the United States, Vecchi says while he sees loopholes in the system,
one of the limitations of that background check that I see that I think needs to be worked on is no one's talked about the mental health aspect.
Some have questioned if it's time to strengthen gun laws, making it harder for citizens to buy a weapon. And many say the law would specifically target mentally ill people.
If you back up and you look at the workplace violence incidences of shootings, the school shootings, all the way back to Columbine and way before, there's a huge majority, high majority of those shooters that have some sort of mental problem. Whatever it is like this, that's one of the biggest problems, is that's a problem with the background check that I think.
Say that I wanted to come in and get a gun.
Okay.
What would I do?
Okay, well, first of all, I would ask you, are you a South Dakota resident? Or are you not a South Dakota resident?
How fast do the background checks go?
Anywhere from 2 minutes to 10 minutes.
Okay, so pretty
And that's
quick.
all on the phone. But the bad guy, again, doesn't matter. He's not going to come in my shop. Bad guy's not going to come in my shop. Bad guy is not going to go to a gun show. So you can make it as stringent as you want. He's going to get his gun. So then you have to back up a second and say, okay, look, what are you going to do about that?
America agrees on one thing: gun violence needs to stop. But the country is divided on just exactly how. Caroline Patricus, NewsCenter1.
And gun rights advocates pointing out that virtually every mass shooting in the United States in the past 20 years has taken place in what was declared a gun-free zone, places where guns were banned. Presidential candidates on the campaign trail now centering their campaigns on both sides of this heated issue. In other news tonight, authorities releasing the name of an elderly gentleman killed in a house fire last week. The man identified as 79-year-old Frederick Morgan. His official cause of death still under investigation. Morgan's home in the 1000 block of Farlow Avenue in North Rapid City catching fire on October 1st. Firefighters rushing Morgan to Rapid City Regional Hospital, where he later passed away. Youth suicide on South Dakota reservations quickly becoming a major issue for Native leaders. Now the Administration for Native Americans is stepping in and awarding a $400,000 emergency grant to the Oglala Sioux tribe. That grant will fund positive activities to stem the tide of youth suicides on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Such activities might include beautification projects, community dinners, and sports programs. And here's a look at today's markets on Wall Street. And on this Monday, we start the brand new trading week in decisive fashion. The Dow Jones rising 304 points, 16,776. NASDAQ Composite up 73 to 4781. S&P rising 36 to 1987. And gold losing $1.50 down to $1,135 and a dime on a strengthening dollar on this day of trade. Today, current and former state leaders paying tribute to former South Dakota Governor Walter Dale Miller. Miller passed away last week following a lengthy illness. Hundreds gathering in the state capitol of Pierre today to pay their respects and bid farewell to the governor in the cowboy